Hello, everybody. I'm Henry Schneider with the Business Performance Podcast, and today it's my pleasure to talk with John Spence, top business leader in the world, author, and interesting, is CEO of the Rockefeller Foundation at 26 after failing out of college. So I'm certain John's got a lot of interesting stories to tell us today. Welcome.
Thank you, Henry. It's wonderful to be here. It's a pleasure.
Well, great. Okay, so to begin with, John, could you please briefly describe what you're doing today, the type of customers you work with, and the types of services you provide?
Sure. It's this is my 28th year, and I do a lot of major keynote speeches to groups, 5, 10, 20,000 people. Do a lot of workshop facilitation and training. I've got a couple of Fortune 100 clients, actually all the way down to medium-sized businesses where I'll run leadership. I just did a peer leadership and influence workshop. So a lot of stuff around leadership, high performance teams, culture, things like that. And then I do quite a bit of executive coaching now. I walked away from that for about 10 years. And in just the last probably 18 months, I've accepted a couple of clients, and I'm having an absolute blast with that.
Okay. So what is the most important thing of dealing with performance to your clients now?
Wow, that's a great question. You've got to have, and this sounds mundane, but you've got to have an ROI. All the coaching, consulting, and help in the world doesn't mean anything if they don't make more money and get an investment back. To me, there's a couple big things I've learned in consulting. The first one is, as goes the leadership team, so goes the entire company. If you've got a dysfunctional leadership team, it can destroy an entire company from the inside. However, if you have a highly functioning leadership team, they can turn around a struggling company and get it back on track. So a lot of the work I do is helping the senior leadership team focus on the right things, get aligned, and get along.
Okay. So when you're looking at that, what are one or two of the biggest myths out there when it comes to performance and leadership?
Well, one of the biggest myths is that the leaders, basically the one that runs the company and tells everybody else what to do. The truth is a great leader serves their employees. I've got a phrase that I love: the customer's experience will never exceed the employee's experience. Mm-hmm. And the myth that needs to be broken is that it's the leader's job to take care of their people. And if you take care of your people, they'll take care of your customers, which will take care of your profitability.
So yeah, the servant leader, right?
Exactly right. And I think the other big myth, because I do a lot of strategic planning and strategic thinking, is that I can set a strategy for the company and it's going to last for 3 to 5 years, and we'll just pursue that. And most of the strategy work I do now is 18 months because things move so quickly. And most leaders don't take enough time to sit and really think strategically. If you're going to run an organization and help it get into the future, if you're not spending at least 15% of your total time reading, studying, learning, thinking, looking at competition, look at the marketplace, there's no way you can be an effective strategic thinker.
Yeah, and the other thing going along with that is spending an additional 15 minutes to come up with some useful indicators so you can chart progress towards meeting those goals.
Yeah, KPIs, leading indicators, all those sort of things.
Yeah. So what are some of the common fears that you encounter?
The biggest one is fear of vulnerability, of being courageous enough to say, I don't have the answer, or I need some help, or I don't understand this, or I don't agree with you. And that's not just, I see that on senior leadership teams or leadership teams of all, is because there's not a good, strong foundation of trust. They don't speak with candor, and that lack of communications really hurts the company.
So how do you get beyond that fear of vulnerability?
Excuse me, I had to sneeze. I apologize.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you again. So how do you get beyond that fear of vulnerability?
You've got to broach really difficult situations and conversations. Usually it's something I would facilitate to get people to understand that what they thought was undiscussable was actually quite easy to handle. Also, I think most people don't have good conflict resolution skills, and they don't know how to have an awkward or challenging or direct conversation. because they just don't have the skills. And then last but not least is, there's a great Microsoft term I like, is be tough on ideas and easy on people. I think that people confuse those, and I feel like I'm not attacking your idea, I'm attacking you. And as long as you can separate those two things, you can have really, really, what I would say, assertive, not aggressive conversations without hurting a bunch of people's feelings.
Yeah, when you start focusing in, people don't like to hear that their baby is ugly, and they get emotional about it. Yeah.
It's setting clear expectations is one of the things too, is that I see is when you'll appreciate this. When I talk about strategy and goal setting and things like that, I say it has to be binary. Our goals have to be black, white, yes, no, no guessing. One of my favorite business phrases is ambiguity breeds mediocrity.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of leaders do a poor job in setting good metrics and establishing a really clear expectation for what success looks like.
Yeah, and it's basically go off and do good things and make it happen.
Exactly.
Okay, so tell us about your career with college and the Rockefeller Foundation. How did you make that happen?
I'll do it briefly. It could be a fairly long story, but I grew up in Miami, Florida, from a very wealthy family. Went to a nice prep school. When I graduated from college, or when I graduated from high school, I decided I would stay in Miami because it was close to my boat and my girlfriend, which is not really why you should pick the college you go to. I promptly failed out with a 1.6 GPA. More challenging is my father was one of the top alumni ever to graduate from the University of Miami. Wasn't happy. I transferred up to Gainesville, Florida, where the University of Florida is. They would not accept me. They laughed at me, literally. I went to a local community college, got my academic career turned around there by one professor, a guy named Roger Strickland. Ended up getting admitted to the University of Florida, graduated number 3 in the entire country in my major, was hired by the Rockefellers while I was still in school to go to work for them. And then 3 years later, at the age of 26, I was put in as CEO, running a private foundation for Winthrop P. Rockefeller III.
Wow.
So I went from failing out of college to CEO of a multinational company in a span of about 6 years.
Wow, and that's not to make your head spin.
It did.
Yeah. Okay, so would you please spend a moment telling us more about your backstory, like what defining moment inspired you to become an advocate for leadership?
Well, that's a really great question. There's a couple things. One of them is all the way back to high school. I was an athlete, not a great athlete, but pretty good. I was on the football team, and I'm a big guy, and I was always then like one of the slowest guys on the team. I was always the last one to come in on laps, the last one to come in, or close to the last on all the sprints and everything. And the head football coach came to me my senior year and said, "I'm going to make you the captain of the defense." And I went, "Wow, that's when." He goes, "Problem though, you have to come in the top 5 on all sprints and all laps for the rest of the year to prove that, because you have to set an example as a leader." And the very next day, I started coming in the top 5 on both of them and realized I could have done it all the time. I just didn't see myself as a leader. So I didn't put myself, I really understood then the power of being a living example and setting an example for the rest of the team. The other thing that really impacted me in my journey in leadership is after I started running companies, I would lay awake at night worried about all the kids I had to put through college. I don't have any children, but I had 40 or 50 kids whose parents were depending on me to run a good company, keep it profitable, allow them to pay their mortgage, buy cars, and save money for their kids' education. And that was a real driving force in me doing the best I could to learn how to be a better leader.
Wow. Very, very inspirational. So, and it all goes back to your coach seeing the potential in you to extract that out of you and push you forward into outside your comfort zone.
Way outside.
Very cool. So kind of related to that, would you share an experience you had early on that still influences how you approach business and consulting today?
Yeah, I think one of the things, because I do consulting and coaching a little bit differently, is when I was rejected from the University of Florida, My dad had disowned me, and I was totally on my own. And I remember after the woman looking at my transcripts and laughing at me, I walked down and sat on the steps of the registrar's office and started to cry. And I realized that no one else was going to fix this for me, that I'd got myself in that stuff. My dad wasn't going to help me. My mom couldn't help me. My friends couldn't help me. So I guess I was probably 20 years old. I made a commitment right then that I would learn everything I humanly could about how to be successful in life and career. And I became a fanatic about studying it. I still read 100 to 120 business books a year and have every year since that year. So I figured that if I just studied hard enough and asked for help enough and surrounded myself with smart people, that I would be able to learn things. Fast forward, when I coach, I do reading assignments. When people ask me to mentor them all the time, and I'll be happy to. I'm happy to. What do you want to learn? Let's just say leadership. I'll assign them 3 books and say, read all 3 books, write a book report on each, send them to me. If you've done a good enough job, I'll get on the phone. We'll talk for half an hour. I'll ask you a zillion questions. If you pass that test, I'm more than happy to mentor you. Probably 100 people a year ask me, maybe not 100, maybe 60. Only one person has ever done it.
Wow. So you're always taking like the Socratic approach there too.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah. So could you please share a story of how you helped a client of yours to be successful and overcome these obstacles with leadership, etc.?
Yeah, this is I'm coaching a CEO of a financial institution right now. Great guy. Became a CEO when he was in his 30s. He's running a couple $2 billion a year bank right now. And this is a real simple one. It's around culture. When he was showing me around the bank, he's got a 3-story branch I was in. And we walked to the middle branch, which was sort of all the processors, all the people in the back of the room doing all the computer stuff and everything. And as we walked through, you could see them all kind of look up like, ooh, the CEO is walking through. And we got back up to his office. I said, how often do you go down? We just walked up the stairway. How often do you go down there? He goes, once every month or 2. I said, no, every day. He goes, what? I said, take 15 to 20 minutes every day, walk down there, thank someone, give them a card, give them a spot bonus or something, $50 or whatever. Those people help run your company. Their work is not very glamorous. You need to show them you really care about them. Very, very simple idea. Basically management by walking around. He said it's dramatically changed the culture. And he said, some of those people now would run through a wall for me because I know their kids' names, their husband or wife's name. They do something great. I write them a handwritten note and put a $50 bill in it. And he goes, totally changed everything. And to think that they were just 1 floor below me and I wasn't paying attention to them.
So how can you distill the moral of that story into something real short?
Your people are the success of your organization is directly dependent on the quality of the people that you can get, grow, and keep on your team.
Yeah. And there's something else that people don't realize is that their assets walk out the door every day at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. And you want them to come back excited and happy every morning and leave feeling good about what they do. And if you are not investing in that asset and taking great care of it, like anything, the asset will depreciate or falter.
Yeah. So that kind of, you're talking about the capabilities of the organization, and you've got to mature them for people to feel ownership in what's going on in a larger sense.
Yeah, and as you look at the folks entering the workforce now, the millennials are actually the largest group, but the Gen Zs, different than you and I. I'm in my mid-50s. When I went to work, it was all about title and bonus and salary and benefits and all those number things. Now with a lot of kids, I say kids in their 30s, purpose is really important to them. For many of them, it's more important than title or paycheck is, am I doing something important? Am I making a difference in the world? Do I feel like I'm contributing? This is a big paradigm shift from 20 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. So, so what does success look like for you as John Spence?
That's actually a fairly easy question for me because I've thought about it a great deal. To me, the definition of success is when your self-concept and core values are in harmony with your daily actions and behaviors. In other words, You've created a very clear set of personal core values that you're deeply committed to. You got a clear picture in your mind of the kind of person you want to be and the kind of life you want to live. And you get up every day and you actually live those values, and your life looks close to that. In America, at least, a lot of us define success as being rich, famous, or powerful. And I've worked for some very rich, famous, and powerful people. When I was at the foundation, my highest earning director made $750,000 an hour for the time he was sitting at his desk. Mm-hmm. And I would not have considered him a successful person. Mm-hmm. Very rich, very famous, very powerful, not very successful. So if that's what you value, I'm fine with that. I like nice stuff, but that's not what defines me. What defines me is, did I tell the truth today? Did I not wear a mask? Am I giving back to the world? And when I lay my head on my pillow at night, do I feel like I've done a good job as a person for the day?
Wonderful. So I saw a TED Talk you did about the leadership of the future on the internet, and I was very impressed by what I saw. So could you kind of relate the backstory of that and what you touched on when you gave the talk?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about that, about how leadership's changed over the years. That, again, when I went into the workforce in '89, it was very command and control. Do as I say, not as I do. Leaders basically gave you orders, you followed them, and you didn't question them. Years later, I went into corporate America as a consultant. I've either owned companies or run the foundation. That's the only two things I've ever done. Several companies, luckily. But when I went to corporate America as a consultant, it was all spreadsheets. It was all numbers. Everything was, run me a report, run me a report. As I said in the TED Talk, they would come in and say, we need to make our numbers so reduce headcount, which means go fire a bunch of the people that we supposedly care about. But now it's much more in the area that we chatted around servant leadership, of understanding that a great leader is there to lift up their people and let them do their best work, which automatically makes the leader successful. Then I talked about 3 quotients that I believe leaders will need to be successful in the future. The first one was IQ, intelligence quotient, pretty straightforward. Another word I would use there is competency. You don't have to be Einstein, but you got to be really good at what you do. The next one was EQ, one that I struggle with quite a bit, and some people do, is your emotional quotient, or your ability to connect to other people, to have empathy. And then the last one, which very few people have heard of, is called AQ, and that's your adaptability quotient. That is your ability to move quickly in a fast-changing world with new information, new ideas, to get rid of old frames and old ideas that don't work and discard them quickly, to embrace things you don't understand and be agile and learn quickly. And through the discussion, my point was that EQ has replaced IQ for sure. You got to be good, but if you don't get along with people, you're not a leader. And now AQ is getting close to replacing both of those. You're going to have a general level of competency. You're going to have a general level of EQ. But if you don't have AQ, you will not be able to survive as things speed up.
Yeah, and that's becoming more and more obvious across the board, just from agile development to the lean startup, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, you've got to be able to move quickly and not be married to your ideas.
And that's hard for a lot of people, especially someone that's been in a position, let's say 15 or 20 years, to earn the right to be a CEO or a senior executive. There were certain things that got you there, but those things may not work any longer. It's sort of like creative destruction. You've got to be willing to tear up something you've used for 20 years because it no longer works today.
Yeah, and look at Sears. Go back to catalog sales.
Yeah. There's about Sears, wait a minute, what was it? Kmart, a couple of the other ones that now don't exist because Amazon and online retailers wiped them out and they weren't ready for it.
Right, and from what I'm saying, from hearing that Jeff Bezos is concerned, he's going to get wiped out here soon too. So you've got to stay agile and keep moving forward and keep adding new services and things that meet the needs of your customer base. So what can you share some measurable outcomes that you have seen as a result of working with your clients?
We always sit down and measure things together. Obviously, profitability is one. Market share would be another that you look at and say we've increased it. The ones that I focus on the most, are customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, which can be measured pretty quickly or pretty easily with a Net Promoter Score and NPS. Also, I invented, or not invented, developed several years ago what I call an organizational effectiveness audit. It's about 28 questions built on my experience and all the books I've read and the companies I've worked with that identifies strengths and weaknesses in a company: leadership, culture, teamwork, communications, customer focus, key measurements. And I will use that as a benchmark. Come in and we'll lay it out to everybody in the organization. We'll all take it, get a report, and then use that every 6 months to literally show progress. I do the same thing when I coach an executive. I ask them we do a survey, we do a 360, and then I'll say, all right, you're on a scale of 1 to 10, you're a 6 here. Where do you want to be in 6 months? Like one of the gentlemen I'm working with right now, he wants to become a better strategic thinker. So what was the outcome? I want a full strategic plan, or a strategic outcome with a strategic vision written by the end of July. We're going to make that happen.
So when you're talking about customer satisfaction, just looking at Net Promoter Score then?
Yeah. Net Promoter Score, or I'll give you an example. The same CEO I was talking to that owned the credit union, or runs the credit union, has about 28,000 teachers that belong to this credit union. And I said, this is fantastic. How often do you talk to them? He said, what do you mean? I said, how often do you survey them, meet with them? Do you have a VIP group? Do you have a new member group? Do you have this, that, and the other? No, not any of that. I said, how many folks do you talk to a year? 30 or 40. I said, make it 1,000. He went, what? I said, talk to 1,000 people a year. It will change your company. Another one of my favorite sayings is, whoever owns the voice of the marketplace owns, or whoever owns the voice of the customer owns the voice of the market, or owns. I'm going to start this again. Whoever owns the voice of the customer owns the marketplace. Yeah. Most businesses I work with do a pathetic job, and they're great people and they great companies, but they really don't go all in on truly listening to their customers. So another benchmark I would use is, how much customer feedback can we get, and how can we use that to change strategies, earn more market share, increase customer satisfaction, things like that.
So focusing on that is great, because I always have a pet peeve with customer satisfaction surveys, because you can change the score just by changing the questions.
Right.
And that,
any survey.
And that doesn't make any difference. You say, hey, we declare victory. So.
Exactly. And and some of the stuff, like the CEO I'm talking about, brilliant guy, this just isn't the area that he has expertise in. So it was a blind spot for him. And he said, I never thought of that. In other areas, he's a genius. And his organization's doing great, very, very high scores on everything. But then he looked at it and said, I wonder how much better it could be if we actually did talk to 1,000 of our members a year in a myriad of different ways.
Yeah, because you got the voice of the customer, you got the voice of the process, you got the voice of the data, voice of the employees. There's a lot of information out there that people don't pay attention to.
Well, when I teach strategy, I've got a little formula I use. I like using formulas. And this one is that all effective strategy is just value differentiation multiplied by disciplined execution. In other words, to win in the marketplace, you have to bring something that's unique and compelling, that your target customers value very highly. They're more than happy to pay for it. That is difficult, if not impossible, for your competition to copy, and that you can deliver on. I like the word flawlessly, but just say consistently, day in and day out. Unique and compelling. Your people are happy to pay for it. Your competition can't do it. You can deliver it. To me, there's only a handful of things that meet that, and you nailed a couple of them. Number one is your people. Number two is your customer relationships. Number three is your brand. And number four is your proprietary data. And one of the big things that I see with companies is they are sitting on a gold mine of data and they do not understand how valuable that is as a strategic asset.
Definitely, and they don't understand the integrity of it either. They could have a lot of stuff that's worthless too, but they're yeah. Okay. So, what's the most important question companies should be asking when they consider looking for a leadership trainer or leadership consultant?
Oh, okay. I was going to different. The two or three things really. The most important one is, do they have the expertise to teach this?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people in my field or a lot of fields that claim to be thought leaders or experts, but when you look at their background, they really haven't been there, done that. So you need someone who's, who's like I was, who's actually had to sign paychecks, who's had to fire people, who's run companies, who's done things that if I'm going to coach you in an area, I need to at least understand it well enough to be able to give you some guidance. Another thing about a good coach is that they're not there to tell you what to do. They're there to help you figure out what to do. Give some advice, give some input, give some suggestions, but at the end of the day, you've got to own it.
Right.
So I do see some consultants that tell, you need to do this, you need to do that. That rarely works very well. And then the last thing is a culture fit. Are they the kind of person you like to spend time with? Like, with my clients, I wouldn't work with them if I wouldn't want to go, have them over to my house for a barbecue. Yeah. If they're not nice people that are fun to be with, it doesn't matter how much I can help them. And the reverse, if I'm not the kind of person they want to hang out with, we should not work together.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, some of these people go in, they got the one true way of doing business, do it my way or the highway. And it's like, it's just, overhead, paper tigers, all kinds of bad stuff happens.
It's one of the most fascinating things I've learned is I realized a couple years ago, again, doing some strategy work and things like that, that all throughout our lives, all through kindergarten to university, we are taught to find the one right answer. Because on a test, there is one right answer. Then the minute you graduate and go out into the business world or the real world, you realize there is no more one right answer. There are multiple right answers. And a lot of times people will get what they think is the right answer, just stop. Oh, great idea, let's do that. Really good strategic thinkers say, great idea, set it over here. Let's come up with another great idea. Set that over here. Let's come up with a third great idea. Then they put them together, and that typically leads you to the best idea. And we talked about breaking habits, adaptability, and agility. The ability to understand that even though I think I understand what this is going on, to back up and kind of like the 5 whys of PQM, say, are we sure about this? Am I asking the right question? Is there another way to approach this that might be better? Very few people, myself included, oftentimes take the time to just back up and say, let's look at this from 4 angles instead of just this one that looks so easy right now.
Well, the other way is to turn on its head instead of saying, what's the solution? What's causing the problems?
Yes.
So what's the most important thing that customers should be asking when they consider evaluating whether or not to use you as their mentor, consultant, etc.?
Experience, as I said, compatibility, and then figuring out together with any consultant or any trainer, what is this? This is the way I always put it. Let's say if I'm going to do a training or give a speech, I will ask my client, if you stop someone after the speech and you asked them what they learned, tell me what you want to hear. Give me the top 3 things you want them to learn, or what is the 3 outcomes, or what does success look like? Let's set that really clearly, and if you can just describe that, we can reach. It's easy for me to back up and get us there. So I'm all about, tell me the outcome. What does success look like? Let's agree on that, and then you're going to have to trust me to build the process or the program or the system or the training or the speech that will lead us to that outcome you have asked for.
Okay. So I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier. It's just phenomenal to me that you're able to read 120 to 160 business books a year. So are you speed reading, or how do you digest that much information?
Very good question, one I get a lot. Yes, I can speed read, and I do use it sometimes. Another thing is, remember that because I've read so many books and I've worked in hundreds of companies, a lot of the stories I will see in books, like a Sears or Kodak or whatever, I've seen those stories 100 times. When they talk about Jack Welch at Crotonville, I worked for Jack at Crotonville. So I can skip stories and things like that. When I see data or research projects I've already seen, I can skim those and skip them. I also have a rule: if I get 50 pages into a book and I haven't underlined anything, I put it down, because if they can't teach me something in a third or a quarter of the book, I'm probably not going to get anything else out of it. I do have a lot of little symbols I use, like a pound sign equals numbers, Q equals quote. And I've got a bunch of those. So as I go through, I'm quickly putting those things in the margins or putting them in my Kindle. And also, you got to realize that I read for data, for information I can use to help companies.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's silly little vignettes or stories about Bob met Mary and Sue and blah, I usually skip all that or skim it really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so on an average 220-page book, I probably only read 150 pages.
Okay.
And the only time I read is when I travel.
Oh.
I don't read any business books at home, but I'm on the road about 200 days a year. And I went to Chicago last week. I read 4 books in 4 days.
Okay. So here's the $1,000 question. Have you encountered the capability maturity model integration? CMMI.
No.
Ah.
What is that?
It's a business framework for improving business performance. And it's a way to look at different aspects of your business capabilities, from doing the work, implementing the work or improving the work, managing the work, and enabling the work to actually occur. So it involves different levels in the organization doing different things like planning, estimating, looking at quality assurance, configuration management, monitoring and controlling the work, and then the executive governance. What are you providing as an executive to make certain all this stuff does happen the way you want it and it supports your business goals and objectives?
So that's why there's consultants like you, because I can't do that. It's classic when people come to me and ask me to do something like that or financial. Like, I am not your guy. It's, I know this. I'm not a process guy, but I know this. If you want repeatable success, you must have process.
Yeah.
However, I know that that's a weak spot for me. So that'd be like, no, call Henry. I can't do that.
You got the triangle: people, process, and tools with quality in the middle. Is what we focus on. So.
Yeah, I'll take the people point. You can have the other ones.
All right. So here's an interesting question. If you think about where you are today, if you were to start all over from scratch, think about everything you've learned up to this point, what would you keep and continue on, or what would you do differently?
I would keep the reading and studying going on. What I would do differently is I would have more mentors and more people in my mastermind groups. One of the things that allowed me to do well in college is when I failed out the first try, I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't talk to the professors. I tried to handle it all on my own. Mm-hmm. When I went through the second time, I asked everybody at site for help. Mm-hmm. And then I started study groups, and I would always ask people with a very high GPA to be in my study groups. Oh. Fast forward to today, I still have a study group, a mastermind group of about 18 CEOs that come to my house about once every 45 days. And we'll pick a book or we'll do a topic or whatever. If I had understood how important that was even earlier and been more aggressive, because there was a point there, basically when I was about 28 to about 33, that I did not have enough mentors and enough people coaching me and enough people to ask for help.
Yeah, that's very good advice. So would you give that advice to like startup entrepreneurs? Or?
Absolutely. That's why I think you should have a board of advisors. And not board of directors, because then they've got a fiduciary responsibility and you owe them some stock or money or whatever. But pick some people that are in the industry you've been in, some folks in your community. It's been my experience. People who are very, very successful always want to give back. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of because I do a lot of work in the startup area. They think that they've solved a problem. They're the only one that can solve the problem. The problem's going to change the world. They haven't talked to any customers about it, but they're positive it's going to make a difference and they're going to make $1 billion. And I think sometimes a good outside advisor can ask questions that are uncomfortable. I'll give you a good example. I was coaching one startup, and the guy had been turned down like 30 times for funding. And I said, why? He goes, what do you mean? I go, didn't you ask every one of those people why they weren't going to give you the money? No. So if you'd asked all of them and they all said basically the same thing, all you have to do is change that thing and the next person will probably give you money. Yeah. And it just never occurred to them to go back when they got turned down and say, specifically, why did you not give us money?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, there's 1,000 good ideas out there, but only a handful that can actually execute it and bring it to market.
Oh yeah, you've just hit the nail on the head. It's when people ask me from a business standpoint, The single biggest problem I see in companies around the world right now, and last year I did 2 full trips around the world in 12 countries, is lack of disciplined execution. Mm-hmm. Accountability and execution. There's no shortage of bright people and cool products and amazing strategies, but there is a massive dearth of people that can take ideas and turn them into action and results in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's so true. I saw Eric Ries speak at the beginning of May, and I'm working my way through the Lean Startup, and it's just a fascinating read. It reinforces everything that I've known for years, but now it's applied to the entrepreneurial world and the Lean Startup.
It's an outstanding book and a great process and a great system.
Yeah, it's just amazing what what needs to be done to get people to turn around.
When I look at startups, I'm sure you've read Jim Collins' Good to Great. He's got the 3 circles or the hedgehog concept. When I see startups, I used to, Jim says you got to be really, really good at something that you're deeply passionate about, that has a strong economic driver in the marketplace. And an awful lot of the entrepreneurial startups I see, they're really, really good at something that they're deeply passionate about. Unfortunately, no one will pay for it. Right. And that's called a hobby.
That's true. Yeah. So you got to get out of that hobby mode and find something that somebody's going to be pay you for. Oh, John, this has been wonderful this afternoon. So thank you so much. So final question, how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more, or even, talk to you, have you come out and speak, etc.?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. My website is johnspence.com. And my email is john@johnspence.com. If you go, I've got what I think is a pretty good blog. Sign up for what I got is something really cool. I've got a newsletter that runs on AI. And I spend an hour every morning reading Fortune, Forbes, Inc., Entrepreneur, Business Insider, keeping up with all the latest stuff, blogs. When I find something really, really good, I send it to my Twitter feed. The newsletter picks up only the stuff that I'm reading, and then what it does is if you ordered it, it would watch to see what are you opening, how long are you reading it, and it would continue to customize, it continues to customize the newsletter specifically to the things you're most interested in. So no 2 people in the world get the same newsletter, and every single thing that's in there is something I personally have picked as something that I found interesting or insightful. Wow. So that's been massively popular, and if you just sign up for my blog, you'll go on that list.
Okay, that's very cool. So, John, thank you so much today. This has been a very fascinating discussion. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
It's my pleasure. It's my honor. Thank you.